Hi, welcome to week 11 of the Open Agriculture Learning series, and my name is Doran Cox. I'm with FarmHack and Green Start, and we're here today with Heather Darby, who's going to talk about GoCrop and those her projects related to GoCrop and nutrient management. Before she starts, just have David and Mike introduce yourselves.
Well, I'm David Johnson. I work at New Mexico State University for the Institute for Energy and Environment and Institute for Sustainable Agricultural Research.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Mike Stenta, and I'm developing an open source software platform called FarmOS for mapping and other farm management related things.
Great.
Great. Heather, I'll let you dive right in.
Okay, great. I'm Heather Darby, and I work for the University of Vermont Extension System. And I guess you can't see my face. This is probably fine because it's not really that great to look at. So
Oh.
I know, it's terrible, huh? And my office is a mess, so you don't want to see that either. But yeah, so I have been working on a nutrient management planning program, sort of software that I developed essentially here in Vermont in response to the needs of our livestock producers here in this state. So it was really sort of specifically developed for farmers in Vermont. And just to give you a little bit of background on why I even took this on, which now some days I just think, why did I take this on? But nutrient management planning is quickly becoming a federal state requirement of livestock farms. Actually, starting in 2016 in the state of Vermont, the water quality bill was just passed here, which will require every farm in the state of Vermont to have a nutrient management plan. And that includes livestock and vegetable farms. Anyone who's essentially applying organic materials to their farms will have to have a plan in place. So I guess the software that we've developed has become specifically important and timely to this state, but I know the other states aren't all that far behind us, including states like California that we're currently working with to develop a version of GoCrop for them. So in 2000, I think it was 2006, the medium farms in the state of Vermont were starting to be regulated. So those are farms that have 200 or more cows. And they were being required to write nutrient management plans that meet NRCS standards. Every farm had to have that. And as farmers are, as many of us are, I'm a farmer too, very independent, self-doers, self-starters. They really sort of were not very happy with the fact that the only way that they could obtain a nutrient management plan was to pay a consultant a pretty hefty fee to develop a plan for them. And in some cases, and even this is true today, farmers are paying $15,000 to $20,000 to have a plan developed, and then it costs them a base minimum of $3,000 to $5,000 a year to maintain it. And that's the baseline for a medium or larger farm. And in Vermont, a medium farm, again, is 200 plus cows. It can cost them $10,000 a year and upward to maintain this plan. So at the time and still today, there was really demand from farmers to be able to kind of do this on their own because, first of all, it's costly. And second of all, a lot of these farmers already had plans developed for them and felt and didn't really know anything about them. They essentially paid a bunch of money for a booklet that was delivered to their farm, and then they would kind of, put it in their filing cabinet, and when the regulator came, they'd pull it out and say, here it is. But then they still went about doing whatever they were doing before. And that's not at all, it didn't settle well with me for a lot of reasons. Like, first of all, farmers themselves, and being an extension myself, we want farmers to be educated, to understand why they should be taking soil tests, why they should be using cover cropping, what are the benefits to doing that, to rotating their crops, basic, real agronomic principles that are parts of nutrient management plans, even though nutrient management plans get sort of bagged a lot for being useless, rightfully so, because for the most part they are useless. But when a farmer takes on this responsibility themselves, they sort of transform from a useless document to something that's a business document, and that's really, for a lot of farms now that have developed their own, sort of critical to production and creating healthy soils, crops, and animals on their farm. So that's how I got started in this. Really, farmers wanted to do it on their own, and so I helped them do that. It was not popular at all with ag agencies here in the state, with industry, with NRCS. We had really no support, I will say, no support from any of those folks to take this on. They didn't feel that farmers were smart enough. Those words actually came out of people's mouths, smart enough to do it on their own. And certainly we've proven them wrong. And now today, our course that we hold and GoCrop itself has helped more farmers in the state of Vermont write nutrient management plans than any other, private business that exists. So that's how I got started. And let me get this opened up here. How do I make that bigger? Here. When I started teaching nutrient management to farmers, we used Excel spreadsheets. Everybody hears this story about. Actually, we used paper and pencils and erasers, good old-fashioned calculators, and farmers loved that. Especially a lot of the initial farmers I was working with, they hated computers. But what we quickly found was that it was really difficult to update a plan year to year by erasing things, especially farms that are very complex. All farms are complex and very different. So it was really difficult to use pencil and paper. And then we moved to Excel spreadsheets, and we quickly found that, again, with the diversity of farms we were looking at and the sort of scale of farms, from very small to large, it just didn't work very well to use Excel. But I have to be honest, and this is one of the challenges I'm sure many people face, is that especially, anybody, a business, a university, the last thing I wanted to do was develop a piece of software that we couldn't maintain, that we couldn't maintain on our own, honestly, which is why I had kept it in Excel for so long, because I could fix it if it broke. I didn't have to pay, a fancy developer to again, create a software that was going to have version 1, 2, 3, 4. I was going to have to distribute CDs to everybody, and I don't know, it just didn't seem like it would work. But we did finally get to a point where we realized we had to move forward, because not only were farms are dynamic, farms are very different and diverse. We needed something that was responsive to that, but also regulations were becoming more strict and are more strict, and the other piece that was really important to me and still is today was that farmers were really having trouble keeping records for their farms in the field, and I don't know if GoCrop's going to change that. I kind of hope it does, but and anybody who's worked with farmers with record keeping has experienced this. When we'd hold a course, for a follow-up class for GoCrop, where farmers would come in to update their plans, they'd show up with literally like cigarette packs with notes written on them, breeding tags for people that know what those are. I mean, garbage, essentially. Somebody had it almost became a joke every year to see what somebody would bring their records in on. And it was really, and most people had nothing. It was whatever they remembered in their head. And to me, one of the most critical aspects of all of this is not just planning for what you're going to do and hope to accomplish, but then being able to actually monitor, and reflect on what you've done, what the results were, and how you're going to modify that and change. And if you're not keeping records, you know, you don't know any of that. And that's when the sort of light bulb went off that we needed a different tool that would be easy for the farmers to use, something they were comfortable with. And that's when this light bulb went off that we should create a mobile application for farmers to keep records with a tool that they're very familiar with. And I just got some statistics sent to me that by some year, 87% of all the farmers in this country will be using mobile technology, which I thought was pretty astounding. But one thing I noticed in my class was that the farmers could barely use a computer. Some couldn't at all. But every farmer had a cell phone, and they knew how to use it. And that's why I feel like GoCrop has taken off in Vermont, because it's a tool that farmers are used to using, a mobile tool. And it also has really spurred the interest and participation in crop, soil, and environmental management with the next generation, because our older generation has passed the torch to the next of kin, or the next in line, the next generation, because they're not as familiar with these tools, but our next generation is. And that's really exciting to me to see high school students. Some of our dairy farmers bring their high school aged kids in to learn how to write nutrient management plans. And what a better way to make a long-term change than to get our next generation of farmers involved that young in soil, crop, and environmental management. So that's sort of how we got started. Probably longer than I should have took, but now I want to share with you what GoCrop does, how it functions, and a little bit about where we're headed, hopefully, in the future. So, GoCrop, like I said, it's a crop and soil planning tool. It's really specifically designed at this moment for Vermont, but certainly is set up, the platform is set up to expand to other states, if other states are interested, of course, and if funding's available. It is really geared towards nutrient management planning, implementation, record keeping, and monitoring. And so, it's really focused on, I guess, those aspects of the farm. So it's integrated planning and management, easy data entry and record keeping from mobile devices. We feel an intuitive interface. I feel that way because we made this with the farmers that were coming through our class. I mean, they were with us every step of the way, and actually still are with us every step of the way. Right now, we have reporting functions for us that meet our state reporting requirements, also federal reporting requirements for NRCS for farms enrolled in those programs, safe data storage, etc. This is kind of how it works. There's two sides of GoCrop. One is the web-based application, where most of our farmers use the web-based application to actually develop. Well, I guess you don't need to see all that. I should do this for you. Where they used to actually develop their plan in the winter from the web-based side. This is kind of where you construct your farm, inventory aspects of your farm, and then create individual field recommendations for the farm. And then there's the mobile side, and the mobile side is really just designed to keep records and to review what you've planned to do. So you can't develop your plan from the mobile device. You really can just keep records. And those two sync back and forth, of course, so as you change your plan or you add records to the website, you will see that on the mobile side, and when you keep records on the mobile side, that feeds back into the website. So it's really a kind of full circle application. So the web app, I don't want to go into a lot of detail, just kind of showing you some of the functions, but we have this set up where farmers essentially enter two types of information. First, you have your farm-based information, describing your farm, inventorying your farm, and then you have your field-by-field information that you're adding in. And you can, I'll get into this in a minute. Okay, so Type of farm information that GoCrop holds currently is just really basic information, basic livestock information, manure management information, and types of fertilizers or amendments that a farmer's using. It's really set up to create an inventory. So here's just an example of that. So that when you're actually developing your plan, you can call from your inventory. So as an example, you can list all your manure spreaders or amendment spreaders here, what kind of spreader they are, what their capacity is, and then what units, sort of the amendment would be metered in. So, this farm has 3 types of spreaders that they use on their farm, and then down here is where you would list manure storages, compost piles, whatever kind of amendments you have available on your farm, what they are. In these cases, it's all livestock manure, the type of manure it is, and then how much you have. So, and the same thing with different kinds of fertilizers. You sort of inventory what you have or what you plan to use on your farm, so that as you're building your plan, you can call from this. All right. So the field information, once you kind of build your farm, create this inventory of equipment.
Heather, sorry to interrupt. We're not seeing an advance on your screen.
Oh. Let me go back here.
There we go. I think it just advanced. Yep. Great.
You can see that. Okay, let me...
So you're at field information screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good now.
Okay, sorry about that. If I leave it like this, is that better? Or should I open it up to the big... Can you see soil test information?
It says, yes, soil test screen, soil test information entered here. Yep.
Okay, all right. So there's just a delay. Sorry about that. Okay. So once you sort of inventory your farm, then you would start building your fields within your farm. And again, our planning process right now is really geared towards creating nutrient management plans. And we do have it really geared towards meeting NRCS requirements too. So there's many of those pieces present in our plan. So as an example here's a field. It talks about elevation. It talks about environmental risk factors on that field, how far it is from a stream, do you have buffers, if it floods, etc. And then over here, there's the crop rotation information that you would add in, and then the erosion rates for every year that you're growing that specific crop. You enter soil test information for your farm, as you can see here, pretty straightforward. And then you enter crop information, select the crops you're going to grow, the yield you expect, and then the nutrient recommendations for that crop, for that field. And then sort of the last part of the planning process is actually planning the nutrients and amendments and fertilizers that you'll be applying to that field in that year. And you can see here it sort of gives you a tally, a balance of what you needed, kind of what was recommended versus what you plan to apply in manure, fertilizers, plow downs if you have past year nutrient credits. And then over here we do risk calculations, phosphorus index, nitrogen leaching, etc.
Heather, it still doesn't seem to, it's stuck back where you were. I'm not sure why it's not updating. Here. There we go. It just updated. Yeah. So whatever you did there, whenever I talk to you, it gets updated.
Well, I'm sort of clicking out, so.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, it just doesn't. Yeah.
Got
so
it.
I'll just leave it like this. All right. So did it move ahead?
Yeah, that just moved ahead. I think just keep it in that form. Yep.
Okay, I'll do that. All right. So again, I'm just really breezing through all this, but the overall goal of the tool is to, basically help farmers meet, their sort of goals for their farm while meeting environmental regulations as well. And this, in my mind, it's giving them an easy way to sort of create a plan on their own, and then manage that plan as well. So this just shows you again some of the screens, pop-up screens. If a farmer adds a manure application, they can select from the storage when they're going to apply it, what rate they're going to use, how fast incorporation, and then it keeps track, of how much they have left in that pile of compost or that, manure pit, etc. Same with fertilizers. You can select from your list that you've created and add fertilizers to fields, etc. So this again is just the planning process. So once you've gone through the planning process, then you get into record keeping during the actual field season, and that's where the mobile app really comes in. You can do it from the web-based app, and here's a picture of what that looks like. But most of this is really, with our farms, it's done mobilely, but you can do it from the web app as well. We also right now just have a very basic reporting function for GoCrop, but we're in the process of upgrading that to be more like query-based, I guess, or searchable. But right now, it basically gives you a field-by-field report on what your plans are for that farm, and then it also gives you a series of other reports like a soil test schedule, whole farm nutrient balance, the P index, which for us is really important, and some other random, well, specific reports for Vermont, but not usually all that useful to the farm. So again, we're upgrading this part of GoCrop so that it's more useful to the farmer themselves. All right, so just quickly on the mobile app, this again is used in the field. We have farmers, I would say, using both iPads that are now mounted in tractors, iPhones, and we do have some farmers using like iPod touches as well. We have probably about 4 or 5 farms that have like docking stations essentially. So they'll have a docking station with 4 or 5 iPod touches. And when employees come in, if they're harvesting hay or spreading manure that day, the employees come in and grab the iPod touches and are able to keep the records as they're doing the work in the field. So, that's really the goal of it, to be able to capture what's happening in real time versus, trying to remember to write it down on paper and then entering it into the computer, taking out some of the steps. So it will display the nutrient management plan. So what you plan to do, how much manure you plan to apply or fertilizer, the crop you're growing, etc. But you can't change it in the mobile app. And then you enter records in real time. So as you're spreading loads of manure, you can enter the loads in, select the manure spreader you're going to use, what manure pit or pile you're spreading from. It has a manure analysis associated with it that you've entered, and it will actually, keep track of how many loads you're putting on, and then the actual nutrient value of what you're doing, at that moment, so that you can keep track of that. And then same with harvest. You can set it up to count bales, count loads, and it calculates a yield per acre for you, and an overall kind of harvest for that field across the year, and a total inventory for the farm across the season as well. So here's just some, screenshots of what the mobile app looks like. Again, this is just sort of the inventory side of things. And then here's where you would actually enter a field. So this is field number 1. You could reflect here, hit the plan button, and it would show you how many loads of manure you were supposed to apply, what kind of fertilizer you were supposed to apply. And then here are the buttons you would click if you're adding a manure or some kind of amendment. You would click Add Manure. If you're adding fertilizer, you would click Add Fertilizer. The recommended nutrients for the field are listed here. And then as you're applying loads of manure, this essentially starts to add up. Same with fertilizer. And then, you see what's still needed here, whether it's positive or negative, and, sort of go from there. Same with harvests. You add a take, and essentially, what you're harvesting, loads, bales, bushels, and how many loads you're taking. And there's a really basic pest scouting aspect to this too. One of our farmers requested that we put in a load counter. So many of our farms have clickers in their tractors to click how many loads they've moved from the manure pit to whatever field, or how many loads of hay were brought out of the field. So now we've sort of built this clicker into the mobile app. So once you basically start to harvest something or spread manure somewhere, you can go to the counter, and every time you take a load, you can just hit plus, plus, plus. If you screw up, you can hit minus. And basically it dates, or at time and date stamps it, so that if you fall asleep, and this is what the farmers were telling us, well, if we fall asleep on the bunk waiting for the guy to come back with a load, or all of a sudden we couldn't remember if we counted one, they can actually look down and it'll say just now you just did this, or 3 minutes ago. So as they're keeping track of the loads or the harvest that they're doing, this is feeding back to that other screen, the nutrient amounts or the tonnage, etc. So this is just a way for them to still not have to use a piece of paper to put their hatch marks when they're coming and going from the field. And then on the mobile side too, we have sort of a summary that people can refer to if they want to. Of course, all this is fed back into the web app, and they can go there and review things later. So that's the website of it. Or the mobile side is pretty basic. It is all iOS platform at this moment. All right, so I would say right now, last winter we had 60 new users start with GoCrop, and prior to that we probably have, I think we're another 60 to 70, sort of teetering in that realm. So we're at about 140 users just in the state of Vermont. And of course, it's really geared towards Vermont at this point. But not hard to sort of modify that for another state that would be really interested in using this kind of application. All right, so there's a lot of stuff here about the benefits. The farmers that are using it really like it. And, it definitely could use some improvements, and we're working on that. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of things we want to do. I think funding is always an issue. We're trying to really keep the cost down to GoCrop because it's for the farmer. It's not for consultants. And right now, we do have a base fee that we're working on modifying, but we haven't quite got there yet. And we're looking more towards a per acre kind of annual fee to use GoCrop. It's kind of where we're headed. We're doing a lot of modification right now. We did receive a grant from the USDA to do some work in GoCrop, and some more work sort of on the animal side, the grazing side. Currently, GoCrop isn't really that great of a tool for grazing farms, so we're changing that. We are working with California to help modify this for their reporting requirements. We're adding in this mapping component, which we didn't have before. More interactive reports and data tables, and then different abilities to sort of export and import data, and rolling over data and storing data year to year. So we have made quite a bit of headway with Go Graze, which will be a part of GoCrop. It can be standalone as well, or it can be integrated into GoCrop. And we've had several meetings with our stakeholders, which are made up of primarily grazing farms, consultants, and organic certifiers, actually, to sort of guide us in the development of Go Graze. So I feel like we're headed down a good path here. We don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but you basically create grazing groups, and from that, estimate land needs by looking at sort of dietary information as well as field information, and then you're able to plan rotations and try to predict surpluses and deficits in feeds and how you're going to overcome that. And then again, the ability to do real-time record keeping in the field, which is super helpful to all farms, but specifically to many of our organic dairies, that have to keep grazing records, dry matter intake records. So we've done a lot of work with doing mock-ups for Go Graze and sort of a new look to GoCrop as well that'll have the mapping component, so you can just see a few shots of that. So GoCrop will look a little bit different with a mapping interface and with the Go Graze components. Here's just another screenshot here. When we get into the grazing piece, many, not all, but many of our grazing farms are haying fields and grazing fields. So we're, building that component into GoCrop to basically, have both crop uses and management in a field. So in this particular case, this is a hay field, but the farmer could then select add grazing to this field. And basically here start going through the process that he would need to go to add John's front field as a grazing field. And then you can see once he's finished that, or she's finished that, it'll show up here under the current use. And then from here on forward, it would be planning as both hay and grazing. Just, I guess, a couple additional things, with Go Graze, you'd be formulating grazing groups, which has meant we've had to build out our livestock piece of GoCrop, essentially allowing farmers to be able to enter all their animals or just to add basic groups. Like I have, 35 milkers and, 10 dry cows, or something like that, versus here is each individual cow and assigning them to groups. So we'll have the ability to do both. Let's see, what else can I show you here? It's just some information about the livestock. Oh, this is part of preparing or figuring out stocking density, and really pulling a lot of this information from the NRCS grazing guidelines here in Vermont. So really helping farmers calculate how many animals they should be stocking per acre and helping them do that planning. So here's land needs by group, whatever groups you've created and how much land they'll need, number of paddocks, acres needed. And if anybody's familiar with the NRCS grazing plan and tools, a lot of this was taken from them. And then that's planned out over the season. And here down below, we're trying to create some other frameworks to help people figure out if they need additional feed, where that's going to come from. Let's see, what else do I have to share here? And then the sort of actual planning piece where you're starting to figure out where the cows are going to move, what groups are going to move from what field to the next. We've built that into this as well, and you can basically do it kind of by selecting groups and fields, or you can use a grazing planning chart that a lot of folks use to do that as well. So I think that's kind of the basic pieces of Go Graze, and then there's the record keeping piece as well. But that's where we're headed with GoCrop and Go Graze. I know that we have some questions that we're wanting to answer and want to have some time for discussion and questions. So I think I'll stop there. See what people have to say.
Yeah, that's great, Heather. Thank you so much, and you guys have made a lot of progress since since we last talked. I would like to open up for questions, but we do have sort of the standard 2 questions that we like to sort of put out to each of the presenters. The first one is, what are the barriers and how might collaboration help you overcome them? And the second one you've pretty well answered, which is, how do you envision your project helping farms improve regenerative agriculture? I mean, I think it's kind of inherent nutrient management, but I'll put those both out to you.
Yeah. Well, I think partners are extremely important. I mean, for a lot of reasons, especially for one, our farmer partners are essential to usability and applicability for what we're doing anyway. So they have been really important to us. But other collaborators that can help us overcome, the different challenges of development and ways to look at things. It's certainly not my area of expertise at all. Any of the development side, the programming pieces. I think we've talked in the past about how do we take these tools and where they sort of come together well. How do we make sure they come together? And I'm still really interested in that. As an example, many of our farms use DHIA, and they have their own software, mobile app that's on Android. And our farmers wish that it could sync up with GoCrop, or there's AdaptN as an example.
Right.
That you need all of the same information that you need in a nutrient management plan to do AdaptN, and our farms won't use AdaptN because the two systems don't talk.
Right.
So I mean, just examples like that, where we can take good tools and make them better by having the synergy between them. It's really important to me because, I mean, this is for the farmers. It's not for anybody else.
Right.
Which I believe brings new and different challenges, really, in a lot of ways.
Well, and that's really the purpose of this conversation in this group, is to try and address just what you laid out, is how do we get these tools all talking to each other. And I think we're also recognizing that from the researcher's perspective, that they have a real interest in the records being done and done well.
Mm-hmm.
But that, that's where we've talked before. Well, I'm also on the page. It's got to work from the farmer's perspective from day one.
Yeah, right.
So they've got to be getting value out of that, and that the research is the next step up. But we've been we've had presentations from Comet Farm and from Field to Market and a lot of these, and we'll have Cool Farm Tool next week, and all of which, as you said, have the same data requirements that can build on it. But I think the key is being able to provide that low-cost decision support that actually has agronomic value right off the bat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's I would love to one of the things that we're hoping to do as we round out this series is to then have the next series be some more workshop meetings where we're actually getting down to what does it take, linking a few of these projects together and saying, let's start mapping out data requirements.
Mm-hmm. I have heard from some of the private consultants that do nutrient management that, they have their own developers that work with them, and they've sort of done things behind the scenes to make tools work together, like AdaptN and their nutrient management tool. it'd be nice if it wasn't that way. Where you know what I mean. It's not like black market.
No, we do it right out
Right,
front.
we do it sort of out front, and we're not, anyway.
I have another question too. Before have you talked with your farmers about data sharing? They just announced the Farmer Business Network, which is sort of farmer-driven research questions, and enabling farmers to compare their approaches and their variety trials and so forth. Have you talked with them? Have you talked with the farmers that have used GoCrop as far as their sense of or willingness to participate in that kind of way with other farmers?
In the dairy industry, there are programs like that already. So, there's benchmarking programs for profitability. So I think many of our dairy farmers are involved with that kind of stuff already. I have not approached them about that. I feel like this is sensitive information to them because of the environmental issues in this state. So I feel like it's probably right now isn't the best time to ask them about it. But yeah, I mean, there would be farms, I'm sure, very willing to share their information, and other farms that wouldn't. And I guess it doesn't matter what the situation is. You always have farms that are willing to participate, and those that, so.
And one of the conversations we've had has been around sort of on-farm data licensing agreements, which could be just small portions of the data, so it's management data, but not your nutrient, other aspects of it, so that you can sort of pick and choose based on what the use was. It would be a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I think farmers are really interested. I mean, obviously, in knowledge and better understanding how what they do impacts them and their surroundings. And I do feel like that farmers are really interested in that, and often don't really get that information. It especially comes up a lot with the environment. How do we know that what we've done has made a difference? How do we know that doing all these extra things is helping us and helping our communities? So I feel sometimes like we sort of collect a lot of data or do a lot of research, and that never really circles back to the people. Not that they always need it the most, but if they're the ones that are making the changes, or that this, impacts their business, it would be nice if they knew.
Right.
Anyway, seems like common sense, but, Anyway.
I'd like to open it up to questions from Abe, Dave, Mike.
No, it all sounds good to me. It's interesting you all have that problem over there. In the Southwest, that's not really an issue, except just around the dairy farms. And that's where they have most of their problems.
Yeah, certainly it's pretty localized.
Very localized here. The rest of it's desert.
Right. Right.
And most of our manure blows over to you, so it dries out and goes away.
Right.
Hey Heather, it's Abe. Sorry, I'm figuring out my camera on my phone, which I had to join this conference from. So Margot and I are building out our new office here.
Cool.
Do you think farmers are using manure and fertilizer more strategically, getting more crop out of it and less expense, and maybe some less runoff and leaching in the process?
It's interesting. We do actually survey the farms, and also most every farm that's involved in the class is followed up with on a yearly basis. So we have a chance to at least gain an understanding of if they felt like it made a difference. Mm-hmm. And I would say that some farms save a lot of money, for sure. They really reduce fertilizer costs significantly. I've had farms take this class, and on the third class they say, you just saved me $10,000. What's going to happen next class? So some people it's pretty significant, but for a lot of people it's money shifting. So they actually end up putting their resources where they need to go versus where they thought they should go, which usually is very different once they actually put all these pieces together. And in terms of, do I think that nutrient management plans impact or reduce runoff, erosion? I think they do if they're followed. Yeah, I do. Because nutrient management plans, again, people make fun of them a lot, but they include all the best practices, right? They include really good or they should. Let me rephrase that. They should include good crop rotations. They should be including cover crops, figuring out, adequate nutrients to apply, the best kind of nutrients to apply, goals of building organic matter. I mean, to me, it all depends on how nutrient management is presented to a farm, and less really about, I don't know. It really depends how it's presented to them and what they learn out of it. And that's why this class itself is so important, because they come and they learn about soil health. If a consultant is doing this for them, not that a consultant wouldn't teach them about soil health, but most don't. Really, it's about completing the document and not about making change. It's really it's a really different way to go about this. So.
Thanks, Heather. A follow-up, this is Abe again, would be most nutrient management plans I've seen have to do with basically maximizing crop productivity relative to expenditure and reducing environmental damage. Do you think that the flip side of that is nutrient management that has to do with increasing soil health in a focused way and even a mathematical way? We know that carbon and nitrogen and sulfur and phosphorus all exist in pretty specific ratios in organic matter, for example. So you might have, 4 tons of carbon in crop residue, for example, laying on the ground, but without adequate nitrogen and sulfur, you won't humify much of that. Do you see nutrient management planning moving into that phase of how do we humify every bit of organic matter that we can, and how do we moderate soil temperatures to favor the bugs that are going to be able to grow humus, that kind of stuff?
I feel like farmers are moving there faster than people that are writing nutrient management plans. Nice. No, I mean, seriously, I feel, and I think we've all seen it, that the focus on soil health has hit the mainstream. It's not just us, wackos sitting in little places trying to get farmers to do something crazy. It's really mainstream, and farmers are very, not everybody, but so many more farmers are really into building soil health, and they know what organic matter is. They've actually heard of it now, and they want to improve it. And sometimes maybe they're not always guided in the best ways to do that, because the people that are guiding them aren't like up to speed on that. Do you know what I mean? So like I said, I feel almost like the farmers are moving quickly ahead of nutrient management planners and old school consultants. Times are changing, and I mean, this is pretty normal, for the most part. Farmers tend to speed ahead of us, and then we try to catch up. Anyway, so I do see it changing, Abe, and I think this class is, a good example where we have the opportunity to get people thinking about it and get them to make change.
Thanks, Heather.
This is David. To that end, can you see that farmers will ever implement composting of this dairy manure before they put it on? Because that would improve your soil biology immensely.
I would say there are more farms today that have combination systems and understand why they do. It's really interesting to me. I work with all kinds of farms, and certainly many of our organic dairies are composting, But we now even have many of what I would call kind of our medium farms, even large farms that have some kind of solid manure or composted manure on their farms, that they choose to focus on fields that they feel are depleted. I mean, people are starting to make really different decisions about how they manage different wastes, or I shouldn't say waste, amendments on their farms. It's not everybody, and I feel like we're making progress in that direction, but people understand that if they have a field that is low in organic matter and needs some tender, loving care, that's a good place to focus the kind of solid manure that has more carbon in it, or their compost, than just putting it somewhere else, or just looking at it as something they need to get rid of. And I think that's really different than what we've seen in the past. So I feel like people are slowly moving that direction, especially some of our more innovative, farmers that go out and educate themselves.
Do you notice any difference in nutrient mobility compared to your raw manure to your finished compost?
What do you mean by nutrient mobility in
Well, as
terms
far
of
as
like leaching or runoff? Yeah,
Right,
well,
runoff.
certainly. I mean, we don't measure it on every farm field, but you would expect there to be a difference based on the composition of it. Yeah.
Would your state give any benefit to those that are doing it that way, as far as paying them to do it differently to reduce that mobility?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that there's a value to all the different amendments that we use on our farms, and
it's in the state's best interest, right? They're the ones wanting this to change.
Well, I mean, right, but that's not the only way to change it. It's not just liquid manure that's causing the problem. I do know that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if they could get paid to do it, if the state would incentivize, that may help you in what you're doing.
What it would be really great if they did incentivize something like that, so that farmers could actually also better transport their manure. Part of what we have going on is that people, apply too much manure in places where it's easy to get to. That's a significant issue here. And hauling water, which is an issue. I mean, yeah, the whole system really needs to change, right? Okay. Manure pits that are there to collect all the rainwater is ridiculous. It's one thing to be there to collect and store manure. It's another thing to just be a place for rainwater. And now the state of Vermont is making people take completely clean water off of roofs and run that into manure pits, and that's ridiculous. So I mean, there's some fundamental issues that have to be resolved. Yeah. So
most years is slurry?
Most dairy farms have slurry, yep.
Okay, that's the problem in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
They're having the exact same issues. The nutrients are flowing everywhere.
Mm.
So Heather, we're almost at 4 o'clock.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that we
yes.
keep you on schedule here. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just, I mean, I feel like we're just touching the surface of the bigger conversation here about getting tools in the hands of farmers to be able to do it on their own, and let farmers lead by connecting to other farms.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing that I'd love to explore a little bit as we go forward is also sort of how do we have third parties who are interested in this record keeping help this process, but still have it be farmer driven. So I see some of our role in sort of facilitating those good tools, and then also the initial data entry taken care of at some other level, making that a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think it is a really important point that was kind of somewhere in the subsurface of this conversation, is that what's lacking oftentimes in the systems that we have is the fact that farmers are truly innovators and can come up with excellent ways to mitigate issues on their farms. A lot of farmers don't want manure pits. My fear is right now that with new regulations on small farms, many small farms will be forced to have manure slurry stores. And there's a lack of innovation within state and federal agencies to help farmers and to understand what the farmers' actual needs are There's no creativity there, and they don't seem to want to do anything unique and different, and farmers are asking for it. And then I feel like they get forced into slurry systems. So
how do we? So a big piece of this is gathering feedback and the data that we're collecting from the farmers, connecting to other farmers to bring innovation and feed that back into the regulatory system. Seems like.
Yeah, and NRCS is not regulatory.
Right.
Anyway.
Right.
But I mean, everybody who is regulatory generally bases what they do off from NRCS standards. So it's it's our entire nation here that's impacted by an organization that's great in so many ways for sure, but just sort of lacks, of course, flexibility, sometimes vision, and I don't know. Guess we better get off this subject. It's gonna be long.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we're at 4 o'clock.
Yep.
Thanks so much for joining us. We've got the Sustainable Food Lab next week with the Cool Farm tool. Also having a lot of this overlap as far as getting data entered. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to following up in the coming weeks.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Holly.
Thanks, Heather.